Florida genuinely confounded me. When I first listened, I could not make it make sense. It felt chaotic and disjointed, like a bunch of intense images just thrown together. Crime, hurricanes, ghosts, disappearing husbands, beautiful dolls. I kept trying to piece it together using just the story the lyrics were telling, and none of it belonged together in the same song. It was like Taylor and Florence weren't even telling the same story. But when I looked at what was going on in Taylor's life when she was recording the song, it suddenly clicked. I even figured out why it had to be a duet. Hi, my name is Krys, and I'm the Taylor Explainer. I unravel the mysteries in Taylor Swift songs by following the threads in the lyrics, uncovering the cultural references and layered storytelling woven into her songwriting. Not gonna lie, this song nearly broke me. I try to look at every Taylor Swift song on its own merits, in a vacuum, so to speak. Taking it at face value generally gives a delicious interpretation of a song upon which to layer a deeper meaning. But Florida, the eighth track on the Tortured Poets department, is pretty much all deeper meanings with no surface layer. I had to stop looking at the song in a vacuum for it to become much clearer. Turns out, Taylor had been circling this idea for years. In Peace, written in April 2020 for Folklore, she's already questioning whether her life is too chaotic to support a healthy relationship. In Ivy, written around October 2020 for Evermore, she admits something even more complicated. Part of her is still drawn elsewhere, even while she's committed to her partner. In No Body, No Crime, also written around October 2020 for Evermore, she's figuring out how to hide her friend's cheating husband's body. And in Anti-Hero, written in late 2021 for Midnights, she laments her unmanageably oversized life while being haunted by the people she's ghosted. And that brings us to the time frame when this song was written and recorded, spring 2023. She was performing in Texas on the Eras tour, went to Florida for some shows, and then back to Texas. During this time, her breakup with longtime partner Joe Alwyn was announced, and her relationship with Maddie Healy was getting tossed around the rumor mill. Just the kind of media frenzy one might wish to escape from. Of course, we can't forget that Taylor didn't write this song alone. No, she had a partner in crime here, the exquisite Florence Welch of Florence and the Machine. Florence told Rolling Stone in an interview posted on their YouTube account that she read a collection of short stories by Lauren Groff, and one in particular called Eyewall piqued her imagination. Let's listen.
And I wanted to bring my own, what I knew of Florida, which is Lauren Groff. One of my favorite short story collections is called Florida, and she's from there. And there's a short story in it called Eyewall, which is about a woman who barricades herself in a bathroom during a hurricane and is visited by all of the ghosts of her ex-boyfriends. And she's drunk and she's holding a chicken.
I'm almost sad the chicken didn't get to make an appearance. Anyway, she says she asked Taylor if she could incorporate it, and Taylor agreed. Next, I looked at where the song lives on the album, because placement matters. Taylor is a storyteller, and she doesn't just tell stories within her songs, but with her songs, placing them with intention on the album to tell a larger story. On the Tortured Poets department, Florida sits right in the middle of the original TTPD album, right after Fresh Out the Slammer and just before Guilty as Sin. The album starts with Fortnight, a fragmented look at the world when the person you want to be with is just out of reach. From there, the album continues in fragmented glimpses. We move in and out of relationships, music industry overviews, and how she adapts to all of it in no particular order. But there's this trio of songs in the middle of the first album that seems to tell a more cohesive story, though perhaps a little out of order. Fresh Out the Slammer signals escape and defiance. Florida captures the chaos of a rebound relationship, and Guilty as Sin focuses on the guilt associated with a wayward obsession. Together, they're telling the story of someone exiting a relationship overdue for closure, rushing into another relationship that's been developing for far too long, if only in your mind, and the price you're willing to pay getting lost in the rebound. So by the time I listened to Florida again, I stopped hearing it as a random chaotic story and started hearing all the storylines Taylor and Florence had been weaving together for us. Before we go further, I want to take a moment and acknowledge that this is my personal interpretation of this song. It is an educated interpretation. It's grounded in my understanding of Taylor's writing style and the context of when she wrote the song, but it's just one perspective. I'm discovering the meaning of this song through the lens of my own experiences and the patterns I recognize in her work. Because of that, I have to acknowledge that other interpretations exist, and this one is not necessarily more correct than any other. Taylor intentionally writes her songs to be layered and at times vague so that we may take from each song precisely what we need from it. That is her zone of genius, and it's what makes listening to her music so satisfying. With that in mind, and now that we understand Taylor's history with the topic, the framework of the Tortured Poets Department, and the context of Florida within the album, we can finally go into the lyrics themselves. Taylor, in her track by track intro for the song on Amazon Music, said she was inspired by Dateline stories about people who flee to Florida to reinvent themselves after committing crimes. I want to play just a small clip from it for you now.
I'm always watching like Dateline. People, have these crimes that they commit. Where do they immediately skip town and go to? That they go to Florida. They like try to reinvent themselves, have a new identity, blend in. And I think when you go through a heartbreak, there's a part of you that thinks, I want a new name. I want a new life. I don't want anyone to know where I've been or know me at all.
So, we're talking about escaping heartbreak, looking for a place to simply disappear. That's the world we're dropped into in verse 1. Right out of the gate, we get a dense first line.
You can beat the heat if you beat the charges too.
There's at least 3 layers of meaning in this line. Heat could mean getting heat like negative attention, it could mean the police and legal consequences, and it could mean literal heat as in warmth. Within the line, you start out thinking it means legal consequences, but then it becomes clearer that it might be the morality police. And further on in the same verse, it's possible that she's feeling stifled by her environment. So she opens with this nugget of layered wisdom and then tells us she's already being labeled as guilty of cheating, already restless in a life that feels suffocating. This is hardly the first time she's mentioned cheating in her songs from the point of view of the cheater. There's Getaway Car, Style, Ivy, High Infidelity, Is It Over Now, Illicit Affairs. The list goes on. These songs have led fans and critics to assume that she's been unfaithful to partners in the past, and here in this song, whether it's true or not, she is resigned to the label.
They said I was a cheat. I guess it must be true.
Then she tells us about the environment she's leaving behind. My friends all smell like weed or little babies splits her world into 2 extremes: people who are numbing out and people who are settling down. She doesn't belong in either of those spaces. She's stuck in between, restless, disconnected, and out of place. When she says, "This city reeks of driving myself crazy," I can feel her going mad as long as she stays there. This is where the last meaning of "beat the heat" from the opening line comes into play. It's getting uncomfortable for her. She can feel the temperature rising. She needs an escape. In the pre chorus, the nature of that escape becomes very clear. Your home's really only a town you're just a guest in captures that emotional displacement perfectly. A place that once brought her comfort and stability now feels transitional and temporary. She's just passing through. And then she gives us the plan.
So you work your life away just to pay for a timeshare down in Destin.
The timeshare down in Destin line is such a good metaphor. A timeshare is planned for, paid for, and perhaps most importantly, only temporarily yours. This rebound wasn't something she fell into, it was something she'd already invested in, but with conditions placed on it. Conditions like an expiration date. The chorus comes in, answering the crucial question: is this relationship meant to last? Florida is one hell of a drug, frames this relationship as an anesthetic. It numbs and distracts, altering your state just enough to make everything else feel further away. But drugs aren't meant to last. They wear off, and you use them up. She's acknowledging what this is and what it is not. It is not about building something sustainable. It is about taking what she can get from this relationship in the moment. This is also where Florence enters the song. Both voices sing these lines. Taylor's escape isn't one-sided. It's not something she's forcing onto someone else. Florence's voice offered in harmony means the plan is mutual. They're both agreeing to use the relationship for whatever it offers. Now seems like a good time to pause and call out one more layer that is woven throughout the song, which is all the nods to Florida beyond the title. We had two references before we even got to the chorus: the Heat, which is practically a main character in Florida summers, and Destin, a popular beach vacation spot for families and spring breakers. Within the chorus, we get an especially fun nod to the Florida State Seminoles, with the 7 drum beats spelling out Florida, just like the Seminoles fight song. Florida is one hell. The references continue in verse 2, with Hurricane Florence bringing in the state's stormy season, and sinking into the swamp, connecting to Florida's 1.5 million acres of wetlands. At Least the Dolls Are Beautiful celebrates that Florida has one of the largest transgender populations in the country, and You'll Get Arrested wraps it all up with a hint at the Florida man phenomenon, featuring some of the most outlandish ways to get yourself arrested. I so appreciate the level of intention here. At least 7 nods to the state, all layered in without taking up much space in the song. The girl really does love her Easter eggs. Okay, where were we? Oh yes, coming out of the chorus where Florence has just joined us. Up to this point, everything in the song has been from Taylor's perspective. She has defined the need for escape, framing Florida as a solution to a problem she does not want to face. By layering their voices in harmony in the chorus, Florence and Taylor demonstrate that they're in agreement about the purpose of this relationship and that it's not meant to last. And that's why this song isn't just Getaway Car Part 2. Without the willing participation of the other person, this could still be an escape for Taylor, but it would change the dynamic. The other person in Getaway Car is unaware that she's not in it for the long term, and that's not the story she's telling here. So verse 2 is where we get to hear the other person's side. Her partner in crime here is not looking for an escape the way Taylor is, and that's where some of my confusion came from. I initially thought both voices were singing from the same perspective, but they are instead 2 sides of a single story. And that's why this had to be a duet. From her very first line, Florence tells us who she is.
The hurricane with my name when it came. I got drunk and I dared it to wash me away. Barricaded in the bathroom with a bottle of wine. Well, me and my ghost, we had a hell of a time. Yes, I'm haunted, but I'm feeling just fine.
She is someone who invites chaos in, reveling in it. What happens when she encounters a chaotic situation? She creates more chaos by lowering her inhibitions through alcohol and basically shouting at the sky. This is an environment she knows how to exist in. While Taylor is seeking relief from a suffocating environment, Florence is moving fluidly within one. The way Florence talks about the ghosts is revealing too. They're just there, hanging out in the bathroom with her. She's cool being haunted. It doesn't really matter because she's assuming that everyone is haunted by the things that they've done. They aren't something she's trying to process or resolve. She just keeps moving forward, which is what Taylor's using this relationship to do as well. Everything Taylor's trying to escape hasn't evaporated, but it's been pushed far enough out of view that it no longer interrupts what's happening right now. This is a space where nothing gets examined too closely. They're not asking questions they don't want answers to. There are problems they're facing that should be addressed, but this isn't the place and now isn't the time. The swamp is a metaphor for how they're dealing with those problems, allowing them to sink, resting just out of sight. The past hasn't been erased or resolved. It's just been submerged, which allows everything to appear fine, while all the trouble is still there, just under the surface.
And in my mind, they sink into the swamp. Is that a bad thing to say in a song?
You know how Taylor said this song was inspired by a Dateline story of criminals who flee to Florida to escape getting caught? Well, here's a fun fact: a significant number of them get caught because they talk about what they did. Anyway, that line at the end of this verse got me thinking about that.
Little did you know you're hungry, only the time you'll get arrested.
The second pre chorus tells us what's waiting for Florence outside of their escape. The situation she stepped away from is still there, unresolved, and still capable of catching up to her. Florida hasn't erased any of it, it's just created enough distance that she doesn't have to deal with it right now. There's a sense here that the clock is still ticking, even if neither of them has chosen to look at it. Their situations haven't been settled in their absence, they're just not dealing with it at the moment. And that illustrates what this relationship can and cannot do. It can delay things. It can soften the edges. It can give them somewhere else to exist for a while. But it cannot change the outcome. It doesn't eliminate the consequences. It simply sinks them in the swamp. That takes us into the chorus, which lands a little differently this time. The chorus hasn't changed, but our understanding of it has. We're not just describing this escape relationship, but the cost of it. Drugs often work because they change how something feels, not because they fix the thing itself. And the repetition starts to feel less like agreement with the terms of their relationship and more like resignation that this is the best it could offer. This is what it is. It does what it does, and that has to be enough, at least for now. That resignation leads them to abandon propriety. Like the criminals that ultimately get caught for talking about their crimes, they're admitting to us and to each other what they're bringing into this moment. One is trying to forget, the other is carrying regret. They're not fixing anything, they're not resolving anything, they're just finding a way to exist around it. Even the judgment for their actions is accounted for. They say it out loud before anyone else can, which removes any illusion that this is something that they believe will be understood or excused. It doesn't need to be. That's not the point. The point is that it works right now. She reaches for something immediate, something intense enough to drown out everything else for a while. Not because she thinks it will last and not because she believes it will solve anything, but because it changes how it feels to be where she is. It makes the pain she feels survivable when she wants nothing more than to disappear. Taylor and Florence join together in the final pre-chorus, which merges the previous pre-choruses, combining Taylor's escape with Florence's consequences. Their blended voices seem to say they forget which story is whose and where one ends and the other begins. You hear both realities at once: being a guest in your own home and getting arrested there, Destin and Texas, the place you run to and the place you can't outrun. Escape and consequences aren't separate anymore. They're happening at the same time, and you don't get one without the other. That changes the feeling of the final chorus once again. First, we heard agreement, then resignation, and at the end, it's complete surrender. She is choosing the thing that will destroy her, because destruction feels easier to face than whatever waits for her back home. This song reflects the reality of knowing exactly what you're doing, knowing exactly how badly it's going to end, and still walking straight into the mess because the alternative feels even worse. And that's something I can relate to. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Taylor Explainer. Please hit that follow button and consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can hear bonus off the record episodes.